The carnival had always been a place of excitement. Flashing lights, music in the air, the hum of laughter and anticipation. When I suggested we go to the grand opening, I thought Lucy would be thrilled, and she was at first. But something in her changed that night. Something subtle, but there. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. She had always liked a thrill, always craved the unexpected. That was one of the things I loved about her. But that night, she was different, restless. She dragged me through the games, past the rides, her energy electric, but it wasn't about us. She wasn't reaching for my hand the way she used to, wasn't pulling me in for stolen kisses beneath the blinking carnival lights. She was looking past me. At what I didn't know. Let's do the haunted house, I suggested, hoping to recapture that spark. She hesitated for just a second before flashing me a smile. Sure, she said, a little too eager. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of artificial fog and old wood. The hallways were narrow, lined with flickering bulbs and fake cobwebs. The scare actors jumped out at the right moments, but Lucy barely reacted. Instead, she lingered, glancing around like she was looking for something else. Or someone. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I should have. Later that night, as we walked back to the car, she checked her phone more than once. I think I lost my bracelet, she said suddenly. I frowned. Where? I don't know. Maybe in the haunted house. She chewed her lip, eyes darting back toward the carnival. I should go back and check. I hesitated, glancing at the entrance. The crowd was thinning, the music quieter now. I'll go with you. No, she said quickly. You're exhausted. Just wait here. I won't be long. It was a small thing, an innocent thing. Or so I thought. She kissed my cheek and jogged back toward the carnival. I leaned against the car, watching as she disappeared into the crowd, not knowing that she was walking straight into a lie. I waited in the parking lot longer than I should have. The carnival lights flickered in the distance, colors bleeding into the night sky. The noise had started to fade as families packed up, kids rubbing tired eyes, couples laughing as they made their way to their cars. But Lucy was still inside. She had said she'd be quick, just running back to the haunted house to check for her bracelet. I had no reason not to believe her. No reason to think this night was anything more than what it was supposed to be. A fun evening, a small escape from routine. But then 10 minutes passed. 15, 20. I checked my phone. No messages. I drummed my fingers against the car door, watching the entrance, expecting to see her any second. But she didn't come. Something about it didn't sit right. Lucy was forgetful, sure, but not enough to disappear without a word. I pushed off the car and started walking back toward the carnival. The energy inside had shifted. The families were gone, replaced by scattered groups of workers shutting down booths, sweeping up debris. The smell of fried food still lingered in the air, but the music had stopped, and the ride stood frozen, their bright neon bulbs reflecting off the pavement. I made my way toward the haunted house, past empty concession stands and motionless Ferris wheel carts swaying slightly in the wind. As I reached the entrance, I spotted a man locking up a nearby ticket booth. Hey, I called out. You seen a girl come through here? About this tall, dark hair, said she lost a bracelet. The worker gave me a confused look. Haven't seen anyone go in since we started closing up. A cold prickle ran down my spine. She said she was checking the haunted house. He frowned, glancing toward the dimly lit attraction. That place. Derek's in there shutting things down. Maybe he let her in. Derek. I didn't know much about him, only that he worked the haunted house every year, running the animatronics and fog machines. He kept himself, mostly. I thanked the worker and walked up to the entrance. The sign that had once read, "Enter if you dare," was half covered by a tarp, signaling the night was over. I pushed the door open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and leftover fog. Dim bulbs flickered along the walls, casting eerie shadows on the fake skeletons and tattered curtains. The place was silent. No workers. No Lucy. I moved forward, past the hallway where we had walked earlier that night, past the motionless mannequins and cobweb corners. My footsteps echoed against the wooden floors. Then I heard it. A rustling sound. Faint, somewhere deeper inside. I moved toward the noise, my heart picking up pace. Lucy? My voice came out steadier than I expected, but there was no answer. I turned a corner and saw a figure emerge from behind one of the false walls. A man, wiping his hands on his jeans, looking surprised to see me. "Derek," I said, recognizing him. He blinked, then gave a short nod. "Didn't expect anyone else in here. I'm looking for Lucy, my girlfriend. She said she lost something in here." His expression barely changed, but something about the way he looked at me set my teeth on edge. "Haven't seen her," he said. "Place is empty." I stared at him for a long moment, something twisting in my gut. He wasn't lying outright. I would have caught that. But he was hiding something. There was something behind his eyes, something just beneath the surface, and the longer I stood there, the more I felt it. I took a slow step forward, my jaw tightening. "You sure about that?" His fingers twitched at his side, just once. "Yeah, positive." The room was too quiet, too still. I glanced past him at the narrow hallway leading to the emergency exit. A curtain was shifting slightly, like someone had just moved through it. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I kept my expression calm. "All right," I said finally. "Guess I'll check outside." Derek nodded, stepping aside to let me pass. I walked toward the exit, pushing through the curtain, feeling my breath slow as I moved into the open night air. My fists clenched at my sides. Lucy was lying to me. I didn't have the proof yet, but I knew. The way Derek reacted, the way the curtain had moved just a second too late. She had been there, maybe still was. And if she thought she could just walk out of here and pretend nothing happened, she was dead wrong. I wasn't going to accuse her yet, not until I had something solid. But this wasn't over, not even close. I drove home in silence, the faint hum of the engine the only sound filling the car. Lucy sat beside me, staring out the window, her fingers tapping absently against her knee. She hadn't questioned why I was waiting when she finally reappeared outside the haunted house, nor did she offer an explanation for why it had taken her so long to find a bracelet that, conveniently, wasn't even on her wrist when she returned. Instead, she had flashed me a tired smile and muttered something about how it must have fallen somewhere she couldn't reach. I didn't push her. Not yet. I had already decided I wouldn't say a word until I had something concrete. But my mind kept replaying Derek's face, the way his hand twitched at his side, the way his body had tensed just slightly when I asked about Lucy. And that curtain, the one that had still been moving when I stepped into the haunted house. I parked the car in the driveway and got out, watching as Lucy stretched her arms above her head, letting out an exaggerated sigh. "Well," she said lightly, "that was fun. Shame about my bracelet, though." She glanced at me, searching my face. "You okay?" I nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yeah, just tired." She held my gaze for a second longer before giving a small nod, accepting my answer too easily, like she didn't want to dig too deep. She walked inside, leaving me standing alone in the cool night air. I took a slow breath, then followed. Inside, Lucy made her way to the bedroom while I lingered in the living room, my mind still racing. I needed proof, something solid, something she couldn't lie her way out of. I glanced around the room, my eyes settling on her purse, casually tossed onto the couch. A thought pressed at the back of my mind, one I didn't like, but couldn't ignore. Would she be careless enough to leave something behind? I hesitated, then walked over and unzipped the bag, carefully sifting through its contents. Keys, wallet, lipstick, a crumpled receipt from the Carnival, and then something small, wrapped neatly in crisp paper. I pulled it out slowly, turning it over in my hands. It was a box about the size of a deck of cards, tied with a thin ribbon. A gift. I exhaled sharply, my pulse picking up as I unwrapped it. Inside was a watch. A men's watch, sleek and expensive-looking, the kind you don't just buy on impulse. A small tag was tucked beneath it, and when I pulled it out, I felt my stomach turn. "Can't wait to see you wear this." "Elle." I stared at the note, my grip tightening around the paper. "Elle Lucie." She had bought a gift. Not for me, for someone else. And if I had to guess, I already knew who it was meant for. I swallowed back the burning anger rising in my throat and sat down slowly on the couch, turning the watch over in my hand. She had no idea I had found this. No idea I was on her. And if I played this right, she wouldn't realize it until it was too late. A slow, deliberate idea formed in my mind. I pulled out my pocket knife and ran the blade lightly across the back of the watch, leaving a deep scratch in the polished metal. Then I pressed my thumb into the glass, smudging it just enough to make it look used, worn, cheap. If she wanted to give someone a present, she'd give them this. I carefully rewrapped the box, tying the ribbon back exactly the way it had been, and slipped it in her purse before standing up. I took a slow breath, forcing my expression to stay neutral before heading to the bedroom. Lucy was already curled up beneath the blankets, her breathing even. She had no idea what I had just found. I slid into bed beside her, staring at the ceiling. She thought she was being careful. She thought she was smarter than me. She had no idea how wrong she was. The next morning, Lucy was all smiles. She kissed my cheek before heading into the kitchen, humming to herself as she poured coffee. Watching her, you'd never think she had a secret. You'd never suspect she was lying to my face. But I knew. And the worst part? She was still playing her part like nothing had changed. Sleep okay? She asked, handing me a cup. Yeah, I said, watching her carefully. You? She stretched, her t-shirt rising slightly over her hip. Like a baby. Guess I was more tired than I thought after last night. I sipped my coffee, nodding. Yeah, must have been exhausting. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching for something, but I kept my face neutral. She held the gaze for only a second before turning away, grabbing her phone from the counter. I might go out for a bit later, she said casually. Gotta pick up some stuff for the house. You need anything? I shook my head. Nah, I'm good. She smiled, slipping her phone into her pocket. All right, I'll be back soon. I watched as she grabbed her purse, the same one I had gone through last night, and walked out the door, her steps light, her head high. I waited until I heard her car pull away before setting my cup down and exhaling slowly. She had the watch. I'd seen her check the bag just before she left, had seen her glance inside, smoothing over the wrapping paper like she was making sure it was still there. And now, she was on her way to deliver it. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and followed. Lucy wasn't hard to track. She had a tendency to drive a little too fast, cutting corners when she thought no one was watching. I stayed a few cars behind, making sure not to get too close. She drove straight into town, heading past the usual stores she went to when she really was running errands. My stomach tightened as she pulled into a small diner, one we never went to together. I parked a block away and watched as she stepped inside, her purse slung over her shoulder. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then, just as I started to wonder if I'd been wrong, a man walked in after her. Tall, dark-haired, dressed casually, but there was something about the way he carried himself that made my jaw tighten. He slid into the booth across from Lucy like it was the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. The way she leaned forward, the way her fingers curled around the edge of the table, the way she smiled, it was all too familiar. Then, she reached in her bag, pulled out the watch. My breath slowed as I watched her hand it over, watched as the man took it, his brows raising slightly as he turned it in his hands. He said something, and Lucy laughed. Actually laughed, as if this was some inside joke between them. I clenched my fists. For a moment, I thought about walking inside, sitting down at their booth like nothing was wrong, watching their smiles drop as I calmly reached for the watch and shoved it back in her lying hands. But something held me back, because I didn't know who he was. Not yet, and I wasn't going to throw everything away until I did. I waited until she left before making my move. I watched her say goodbye, watched the man tuck the watch into his jacket pocket, watched her place a hand briefly on his wrist before she turned and walked out the door, her expression light, carefree. She had no idea I was standing just outside, waiting. She drove home, and I waited until she was gone before stepping inside the diner. The man was still at the booth, stirring his coffee, the watch resting on the table beside him. I walked straight up and sat down across from him. He looked up surprised. Can I help you? I stared at him, my jaw tight. That's a nice watch. Where'd you get it? His brow furrowed, and he glanced down at it before looking back at me. It was a gift. Yeah? I asked, my voice even. From Lucy? His face changed, not guilty, but confused. He sat up straighter, studying me now. Yeah, she said it was a thank you. A thank you for what? for helping her find her bracelet last night at the carnival. The words hit like a slap. I blinked. What? He tilted his head. You're a boyfriend, right, Andrew? I nodded slowly, my pulse hammering. Look, man, I don't know what's going on, he said, sighing. But Lucy lost her bracelet at the haunted house. I was there helping close up, so I let her look around. She seemed stressed about it. I helped her check behind some of the set pieces, but we didn't find it. She left after a while. This morning, she texted and asked if I could meet her for coffee, said she wanted to thank me properly for taking the time. I stared at him, my mind reeling. So he wasn't a guy. Lucy had lied about the bracelet, about going back to the haunted house, but this wasn't the affair. This wasn't the man she was sneaking around with. I had been wrong. He frowned, picking up the watch. I thought it was weird, honestly. It's a little expensive for just a thank you. He studied me. Did something happen between you two? I let out a slow breath, forcing my face to relax. Nah, just wanted to make sure she wasn't giving gifts to random strangers. He chuckled. Fair enough. I stood up, forcing a nod before turning toward the door. My chest was still tight, my fists aching from how hard I'd clenched them. I had almost confronted her, almost called her out, almost let my anger get the best of me. But I had been wrong, which meant that somewhere out there, the real secret was still waiting to be found. And now, I had to start all over. I drove home with my hands tied on the wheel, my mind running circles around itself. I had been wrong. Lucy wasn't cheating with the guy at the diner. He was nothing more than a distraction, a misstep in the wrong direction. But she was lying. That much I knew. And if she had been careful enough to set up a false trail, that meant she was still hiding something bigger, something I hadn't found yet. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, watching the house. The curtains were drawn, but the faint flicker of the TV glowed through the window. Lucy was inside, probably curled up on the couch like she had nothing to worry about. Like her carefully crafted lies were still holding strong. I stepped out of the truck, keeping my breathing steady. If I let her see even a hint of what I knew, or worse, what I didn't know yet, she'd adjust. She'd cover her tracks, make sure I never found the truth. No, I had to be smarter. I had to play this the right way. I walked in, keeping my expression easy. Lucy looked up from the couch, her face lighting up in that same effortless way. Hey, you're home early, she said, shifting to sit up. Everything okay? I forced a chuckle, shaking my head. Yeah, just got bored of running errands. Figured I'd come back and relax. She smiled, patting the cushion next to her. Come sit. There's a documentary on about those crazy magicians that pull off impossible stunts. I figured you'd like it. I sat, letting my body settle into the seat, my mind already working behind my calm exterior. You go anywhere else today? She stretched, letting out a soft sigh. Nah, just the usual places. Picked up a few things for the house, grabbed a coffee, ran into one of the girls from work. You know, normal stuff. Lies. More lies. I nodded, pretending to focus on the TV. Yeah? What did you guys talk about? She shrugged. Just work. How we both need a vacation. The usual complaints. She turned to me, giving me that innocent look that had fooled me so many times before. You sure you're okay? You seem, I don't know, distracted. I glanced at her, forcing a small smirk. Just tired. She studied me for a second longer, then relaxed, leaning into my shoulder. Well, you should sleep early. You've been running yourself into the ground lately. I let out a soft chuckle. Yeah, maybe I will. But I wouldn't. Not until I found the truth. She fell asleep before midnight, her breathing deep and steady. I waited, staring at the ceiling, counting the slow rise and fall of her chest. When I was sure she wouldn't wake up, I slipped out of bed and moved carefully into the living room. I needed more than just suspicion. I needed proof. I went through her purse again, but it was clean, too clean. The kind of careful that meant she had started covering her tracks. I checked the usual places, her dresser, her nightstand, the pockets of her jackets, but nothing stood out. She wasn't keeping anything obvious in the house. So I checked her car. The glove compartment had the usual junk, napkins, an old parking ticket, a few receipts. But then I found something tucked underneath the floor mat on the passenger side. A Carnival ticket stub. I frowned, pulling it out. It wasn't from the night we went together. It was from the next day. The day after she told me, she had stayed home all evening. My pulse slowed, the weight of realization settling in my chest. She had gone back, not just for the bracelet, not for anything she had told me. She had gone back because someone was there waiting for her. I exhaled, my fingers tightening around the stub. If she had been meeting someone at the carnival, then someone there knew. Someone had seen her, and that meant my next move was clear. I was going back to where it all started. The carnival was quieter during the day, stripped of its nighttime magic. The bright lights were dim, the ride still, the game booths half-covered as workers moved lazily through their routines. I parked near the back and walked in, my eyes scanning the scene. I needed to find someone who had been there that night, someone who would talk. The ticket booth seemed like the best place to start. I walked up to the older man sitting behind the counter, his eyes barely lifting from his magazine as I approached. "Hey," I said casually, leaning against the window. "You were here the other night, right?" The man sighed, closing his magazine. "Depends on which night you mean." "Grand opening," I said. "And the night after." He raised a brow. "Yeah, I work both." "Why?" I pulled the stub from my pocket, holding it up. "My girlfriend lost something here. She came back the next night to find it, but she didn't tell me much about what happened. Figure I'd ask around, see if anyone remembers seeing her." The man studied me for a long moment, then rubbed his chin. "Dark-haired girl? Pretty?" I nodded. He clicked his tongue, thinking. "Yeah, I remember her. Came back late, said she was looking for something. But she wasn't alone for long." My breath stilled. "Who was she with?" The man shrugged. "Didn't see much, just that she met up with one of the workers from the haunted house. They slipped inside not long after she got here." "The haunted house?" I clenched my jaw. "Which worker?" "Don't know his name, but if I had to guess, probably Derek. He's the only one who sticks around after close." My stomach turned. Derek, the same man who had stood in front of me that night and lied to my face. I exhaled slowly, forcing a nod. "Appreciate it." The man waved me off, already picking up his magazine again. I turned, walking back toward my car, my mind burning with the weight of what I had just learned. Lucy had lied. Again. She had gone back to the carnival, back to the haunted house, back to him. And now, I knew exactly where to look next. Derek had the answers. I was going to get them. I drove straight to the carnival, my grip firm on the wheel, my pulse steady. Now that I knew who Lucy had been sneaking around with, I wasn't wasting any more time. Derek had the answers, and I was going to get them. The afternoon sun hung low in the sky by the time I pulled into the empty lot. The carnival wouldn't fully open for a few more hours, but I didn't need a crowd. I needed a conversation that Derek wouldn't be able to run from. I walked through the quiet rows of game booths and silent rides, the haunted house looming ahead like a rotting carcass. The wooden sign above the entrance swayed slightly in the breeze, its peeling paint making the letters look more sinister than they should have. "Enter if you dare." I had already entered once, thinking nothing of it. This time, I was stepping in with my eyes open. The inside was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the walls. The smell of old wood and lingering fog machine chemicals clung to the air. I walked deeper, past the fake corpses and plastic cobwebs, moving with purpose. I heard movement toward the back. Then, Derek stepped into view. His eyes flickered with surprise before narrowing. "You again," he muttered. I nodded. "Yeah, me again." He wiped his hands on a rag, tilting his head slightly. "Something I can help you with?" I exhaled, keeping my voice even. "I know Lucy was here after closing. I know she met with you." Derek didn't flinch, but there was a slight shift in his stance, a moment of calculation. "She lost her bracelet," he said. I let her look around. "Try again," I said, my tone firm. "She was here. With you. She lied to me about it. So, tell me, what were you two really doing?" His jaw tightened, but he forced a smirk. "What's it matter?" I stepped closer, lower my voice. "Because I don't like being lied to." He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "That's between you and her, man. I didn't make her come back. But you didn't send her away either," I said, studying him. "So what was it? Just talking? Something else?" His smirk faltered for just a second. "I don't owe you an explanation." "That's where you're wrong," I said, "because I'm not leaving until I get one." He stared at me for a long moment, his fingers tightening around the rag in his hands. Then, finally, he sighed, shaking his head. Look, she came back. She seemed nervous. Said she wanted to see the haunted house again, but without all the noise, without all the people. And you just let her? He shrugged. Why wouldn't I? I clenched my jaw. Because she's not your problem. She's mine. And if you think I don't see through this little game, you're dumber than you look. Derek held up his hands in mock surrender. Hey, man, if you got a problem, take it up with Lucy. Oh, don't worry, I said, stepping back. I will. I turned and walked out, leaving him standing there in the dim light of his pathetic haunted house. He thought he had slipped away, thought his vague answers were enough to throw me off. But I wasn't done, not even close, because now I knew exactly where I was going next. Straight to Lucy. And this time, she wouldn't have anywhere left to hide. I drove home with the kind of quiet, controlled rage that settles deep in the bones. Derek had been careful with his words, but I had seen it. The hesitation, the twitch in his jaw, the way he refused to deny what had happened. He hadn't confessed, but he didn't need to. I had everything I needed. Lucy was lying. She had been with him. And now, she was going to face it. The sun was beginning to set by the time I pulled into the driveway. I sat in the truck for a moment, watching the house, breathing slow and steady. Lucy's car was already there. She had no idea what was coming. No idea that every excuse, every carefully spun lie was about to collapse. I walked inside. She was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine, looking completely at ease. She glanced up, flashing that effortless smile. Hey, you're home early. I shut the door behind me, my movements slow, deliberate. Yeah, had an interesting day. She raised a brow, swirling the wine in her glass. Oh, something happened. I stepped forward, pulling the Carnival ticket stub from my pocket and setting it on the counter between us. Yeah, ran into someone who told me you went back to the Carnival after closing. Her fingers tightened slightly around the glass, but her face remained smooth. I already told you. I went back to look for my bracelet. I nodded, my jaw tightening. And Derek? Was he helping you look for it too? For just a fraction of a second, her expression cracked. A flicker of something, shock, calculation, before she forced an easy laugh. Oh, come on, Andrew. What is this? An interrogation? I didn't blink. I talked to him. That wiped the amusement from her face. I stepped closer, my voice low, steady. He didn't deny it, Lucy. He tried to dance around it, but he never denied it. You were there, with him, not looking for your bracelet. So tell me, what were you really doing? Her breath came faster now, her grip on the wine glass so tight I thought it might crack. I don't know what he told you, she said carefully, but you're blowing this way out of proportion. I let out a short, sharp laugh. That's the thing, Lucy. He didn't tell me anything. And you know why? Because he didn't need to. I already know. Her face paled. Andrew, I held up a hand, cutting her off. No more lies. No more excuses. Just tell me the truth for once in your life. She swallowed hard, her mind racing for an escape route, for a way to turn this around. But there wasn't one. Not this time. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then, finally, she set the wine glass down, exhaling shakily. It wasn't what you think, she whispered. I stared at her, feeling nothing but cold certainty. It never is. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the wreckage of her own making. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. The real reckoning was still to come. I barely slept that night. Not because I was unsure, not because I was heartbroken. No, I had moved past that. What kept me awake was the plan. The need to make sure that Lucy didn't just get away with this. She had built her lies so carefully, played her part so well, that she thought she could walk away clean. But I wasn't about to let that happen. By morning, I had everything set. The Carnival was holding a town family night that evening. Cheap tickets, discounted rides, a fireworks display to close out the season. It was Lucy's favorite night of the whole event. She loved the nostalgia of it, the way it made her feel like a kid again. She had no idea that this time, it was going to make her feel something entirely different. She barely spoke to me all day, hovering around the house, tense and jumpy. She knew I knew, but she didn't know what I was going to do about it. That fear, that uncertainty, it was starting to eat at her. By late afternoon, she finally cracked. Are we still going to the Carnival tonight? She asked carefully, standing in the kitchen doorway. I turned, pretending to consider. Why wouldn't we? Her lips parted slightly, like she had expected me to say no. Like she had expected me to be the one to back down. I wasn't sure. I shrugged. You love family night, right? She nodded slowly. Yeah, I do. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Then let's go. The carnival was packed by the time we arrived. Kids ran ahead of their parents. Teenagers huddled in tight groups, and the scent of buttered popcorn and fried food filled the air. The energy was bright, lively, the exact opposite of what was coming. Lucy seemed to relax as we walked in, the warm glow of the festival lights giving her a false sense of comfort. She probably thought that meant I was letting it go, that I had accepted whatever half-baked excuse she had tried to sell me. She was wrong. I guided her toward the main stage, where a small crowd had gathered for the night's entertainment. A large projector screen was set up, the kind they used to display highlights from the carnival. Funny moments from the haunted house, reaction shots from the roller coasters. And then, of course, my addition to the reel. Lucy had no idea what was coming. The event organizer stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. All right, folks, before we light up the sky with fireworks, let's take a look at some of the best moments from this year's carnival. The crowd clapped, laughing as the first clips rolled. Kids screaming on the drop tower, a dad getting soaked on the log flume, a couple getting caught by a jump scare in the haunted house. Lucy smiled slightly, letting her guard down, blending in with the crowd. Then the footage changed. The screen flickered, cutting to a new angle. A grainy, night vision shot from the haunted house's security cameras. The timestamp read past closing hours. The image was dark, but clear enough to see. Lucy, slipping inside the haunted house. Not alone. The crowd murmured in confusion as the footage continued. Shadows moved against the dim lighting. A hushed conversation, a lingering touch. Then, unmistakably, Derek. The two of them slipping deeper into the haunted house, past the main corridors, disappearing behind one of the false walls. The murmurs grew louder. Some people gasped. Others exchanged glances. Recognition spread like wildfire. And right next to me, Lucy froze. Her breath hitched, her fingers clenching at the fabric of her jacket. She didn't look at me. She couldn't. I leaned in slightly, my voice barely above a whisper. I told you, Lucy. No more lies. She staggered back, her face draining of color as the footage ended abruptly, cutting back to the normal carnival highlights. But the damage was done. People were already turning, whispering, staring. Cassie, one of her co-workers, was standing nearby. She looked at Lucy with wide eyes. Lucy, what the hell was that? Lucy's lips parted, but no words came out. The organizer, completely unaware of what had just happened, chuckled nervously into the microphone. Looks like we had a little mix-up in the footage. Anyway, let's get ready for fireworks. But no one was watching the sky anymore. They were all looking at Lucy. I took a slow step back, letting her stand there in the middle of it, exposed. Alone. And just as the first firework exploded above us, painting the night in bursts of gold and silver, I turned and walked away. Lucy wanted thrill, excitement, danger. She just never expected to be the one caught in the spotlight. I didn't look back as I walked away, but I could hear it. The whispers, the murmurs, the sharp inhale of Lucy realizing her world had just crumbled beneath her feet. The carnival fireworks exploded above the crowd, lighting up her humiliation for everyone to see. The perfect ending to a carefully planned reveal. No screaming match. No dramatic confrontation. Just the cold, undeniable truth laid bare for all to witness. I made it to the parking lot before I heard her footsteps pounding behind me, the frantic rhythm of someone desperate to regain control. Andrew. Her voice was sharp, laced with panic. Stop. Just stop. I didn't. Not until she grabbed my arm, forcing me to turn. Her face was a mess of anger, fear, and something else, pleading. What the hell was that? She hissed, her breath ragged. I met her gaze, calm and steady. That, I said slowly, was the truth. Something you had a real hard time telling me yourself. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting between mine, trying to find a crack, an opening. You humiliated me. I tilted my head. Did I? I let the words sink in before taking a slow step toward her. Or did you do that when you decided to sneak around with Derek, thinking no one would ever find out? Her jaw clenched, but she didn't deny it. She knew there was no point. She let out a shaky breath, shifting tactics. Andrew, I made a mistake, okay? It didn't mean anything. I was just, spare me, I cut in. I don't care about whatever excuse you've got lined up. You lied, over and over, and you thought you could get away with it. I took another step back, watching her eyes widen. But guess what, Lucy? You didn't. She exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. We can fix this. We can talk about this. I laughed, shaking my head. Fix it? There's no fixing this, Lucy. You burned it down yourself. She blinked rapidly, as if the reality of the situation was finally sinking in. So that's it, she whispered. You're just going to throw everything away? My jaw tightened. No, Lucy, you did. The second you decided I wasn't enough. The second you made me feel crazy for questioning things when I was right all along. The second you thought Derek was worth more than the life we built. Her breath hitched, but I didn't let it soften me. You're not going to play the victim here, I said, my voice cold. Not after everything you've done. Tears welled in her eyes, but I saw them for what they were, regret, not for the betrayal, but for getting caught. She tried again. Andrew, I love you. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the words settle in. Then, finally, I let out a breath and said, no, you don't. I pulled my keys from my pocket and stepped around her, heading toward my truck. She didn't follow this time. She just stood there, fireworks bursting overhead, watching me leave, because she knew there was no coming back from this. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.